she had told me you had asked us to get it done. No, we're fine. Yes, she had told me. So he's going to broadcast it on Alhikmat TV
Alhamdulillah.
and on some social networks.
Beautiful.
All right?
Beautiful. Alhamdulillah. You cue us then when we should start. Perfect.
What you have? Yeah, card. No, no, give me a card.
Just get one for me, one for you. Yeah. You want to introduce us? Yes. Then you pass it to me and then I introduce Omar.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. We have today our representatives from CARE. We have a brother Wilfredo Ruiz and a brother Omar Saleh. These two brothers are here to actually give you some tips on knowing your rights when traveling. Today, as you know, as a result of so many political events and people, there has been a lot of focus on Muslims traveling, in particular by air and airports, etc. And I know, and most of you who travel a lot will understand what we mean. So today, CARE, we really appreciate them coming to really talk to you all about the advantages of taking certain precautions in the way you carry yourself and what could and what may happen and what may not happen, inshallah. So today I'll pass you on to Brother Wilfredo, who will start the ball rolling, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, we're going to have Brother Omar Saleh. He's from our Civil Rights Department or our Legal Department. And he's going to be giving a training on knowing your rights when traveling. Needless to say that our community is under attack. Our community is regularly singled out, especially in the ports of entry of our nation, and our community is being targeted and singled out just for the fact that they're Muslims, or they're evidently Muslims, some of them, or they carry a Muslim name or an Arab name, or for whatever reasons that we still don't know, some of us are put in some kind of lists and prevented from traveling. So all those kind of issues, inshallah, Brother Omar is going to be addressing what to do in a port of entry when leaving the country, when planning to fly back to the country, what things we may be facing. And we're going to give some examples on things that has happened to our current care clients. Recently, in a period of 6 months, we had 2 Florida residents, both American citizens with their passports in their pockets, wanting to travel, one from Europe, the other one from the Middle East, and they were prevented from boarding a plane to coming back home. 2 cases in less than 6 months here in our offices in Care, Florida. So this is a reality. It's not a what if. What if they single us in the line in the TSA and say, you randomly, let's come and do a secondary search? How random is that random? So all those questions, inshallah, we'll be able to address. Some things we will present to you the potential scenarios, but on some things, it is up for you to decide what to do. And I'm going to give you just one example, but that is going to happen in many occasions during the training. When we're traveling, when we're going through the TSA checkup, the guys with the blue shirt, where you have the magnets, people stand like this. People have the option to opt out from this machine where you stand like this, because in that machine, you're projected in a screen with all the anatomy of your body shown in a screen. Some people don't like that, and they'd rather ask for a personal screening. So that personal screening is somebody then personally touching your body to make sure you're not carrying anything dangerous. Some people don't like to be physically touched, and they prefer then to stand in the machine. Some people don't like to be seen, that their anatomy of their body is being seen in a room somewhere, and they rather ask for a personal screening. So those kind of options we're going to be, inshallah, giving, and there's not a definite answer which one we should select. We will tell you, if you select this, this might be the consequences. If you select this, this might be the other consequences. Okay, so thank you for your attention, inshallah. I'll be interjecting from time to time while Omar gives the training, just to bring you another example or try to elicit some questions from you, okay? We'll use this one.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. As Brother Wilfredo said, he'll be interjecting from time to time to kind of offset. Sometimes I tend to get monotonous. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah for the opportunity to come speak with everyone. First and foremost, we thank Allah. I'd like to thank the whole Darul Uloom family, Sheikh Shafa'at, Brother Azad, for having us here tonight. This is going to be, hopefully, inshallah, the first of many Know Your Rights, or KYRs as we call them. There's a lot of different issues that come across my desk, not just travel issues, but it's good to see some of our young brothers and sisters here. Fortunately, we have a lot of issues related to school. We handle employment matters everywhere from the boardroom to the schoolroom. And so, inshallah, we'll be providing more Know Your Rights trainings on certain topics like employment. But today, inshallah, we'll be dealing with talking about traveling and knowing your rights while traveling. The reason why we really encourage this to be less of a one-way know your rights, I want to encourage this to be a discussion, inshallah, with the brothers and sisters. If they have any questions in the back, they can submit a written question. The reason why we're doing this is because it's very important for all of us to be aware of what's going on and know what the status quo is today, in this day and age. If we are unaware of what the issues are and we don't know what our rights are continuously just going to be trampled to a greater extent. So that's why we want to provide our brothers and sisters with the tools to know what their rights are and be able to not just assert them, but to confidently assert them. It's very important that when at the airport and you have the option to deny certain questioning, to do it with confidence and not to be intimidated, especially if you're a U.S. citizen. It's important to stay informed. I consider this masjid one of the, Sheikh Shafat, I always get a dose of knowledge from his Friday khutbahs. You're not going to be able to tell because Sheikh Shafat doesn't really age versus me in my grayness. But when I was 13, I remember hearing Sheikh Shafat over at Nur al-Islam. And so I was born and raised here. I take it as a pleasure and an honor to be amongst everybody now giving back to the community in the form of a KYR. So we'll get started, and from time to time, Wilfredo will either interject or we might do a role play on what you should do when you're traveling, when you get into town from abroad. I should say that this is going to be a high-level discussion, and if you have specific legal questions, either see me afterwards, inshallah, at the table, or if you don't get an opportunity to do so, just take a card and give us a call. You can call us anytime, inshallah. That's what we're here for. We're here for you. So when you're traveling abroad and you're coming back into the United States, there's going to be, I'm going to categorize two different types of entry points, okay? One is going to be if you're a U.S. citizen, and the second is if you're not. So when you get off the plane, there's going to be two lines, and most everybody would probably all seen it, okay? There's a line for U.S. citizens and a line for lawful permanent residents, green card holders, and visa holders. When you're at the border, generally cell phones are not allowed to be used. So what we suggest is that when you are coming in, to make sure you text your family members, provide them a copy of your itinerary so they know when you're coming in and where you're supposed to be. When the plane lands, it's a good idea to text your loved ones that you've landed so that they know you're on the grounds. And if 2 hours go by and they haven't heard from you, they know to contact a group like CARE, and we will follow up. Alhamdulillah, we have contacts with Customs and Border Patrol and Homeland Security, so that if we see an issue, we can directly interject as soon as possible, inshallah. So that's a good piece of advice. It lets your family members know where you are. From times we get phone calls that, you know, family members just don't know where their loved one is. They know they're traveling. We can assume that they're probably stuck, but we don't know. So it's a good idea to have the itinerary. So you get down. Everybody goes through what's called primary inspection. And if you're a U.S. citizen, what primary inspection is, all it is identifying whether you are a U.S. citizen or not. If you show your passport, you'll be asked questions like, where did you come from? What was the intention of your stay? And are you carrying more than $10,000? That's the extent of the questions you're going to get in primary. It's really just to identify whether or not you're a U.S. citizen. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you're going to go in, identify by showing your immigration papers. You might get fingerprinted. U.S. citizens have to be allowed into the country, which brings me to the second inspection point. If you get taken through that inspection point, and a lot of our clients that are on a selectee list or a watch list get taken through this secondary inspection, which you've probably heard of. Somebody you know or yourself has been, stuck at the airport for hours in secondary inspection. If you are a U.S. citizen, it is mandatory that you be allowed to enter into the country. You might get asked a series of questions, a little more in depth, like, with who did you stay? And what specific places did you visit when you were abroad? And why did you visit? Those sort of questions, you can answer them, but you don't have to. If you don't, you still have to be allowed into the country as a U.S. citizen, but it might lead you to heightened screening and increased delay.
Bismillah. Very commonly, people ask us, then what decision will we do? If they go into, could you tell me the places you were in Russia when you went to see the World Cup? Which places do you visit? The straight question is, do you need to answer that question? Who does think that you are obligated to answer that question? Good. That's the message we want to say. You might elect to answer the question. Some people say, if I go along and answer the questions, will that expedite my questioning and my time with them? We have had the two cases. People that say, I don't need to answer those type of questions to you, officer. I just need to identify myself, show you what I'm bringing to the country. declare the money I'm bringing into the country, tell you my address where I live, identify myself, right? And that's it. That's it. Are you Muslim? Non-Muslim? Are you Shia? Sunni? Are you a devout Muslim? All those questions. People who select to do da'wah in that moment, possibly that's not the best spot to do da'wah. That is the spot to go through a legal procedure. You should take it seriously and answer what you're required by law to be answered. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to give a good, quick thing you can memorize when you're being approached, and if you feel that you're being asked inappropriate questions, which brings me, and let me kind of make this distinction before I get into that. Anybody has the right to not answer the questions that you're being asked. If you're a U.S. citizen, you don't have to answer questions. You have to be allowed into the country. It could lead to delays in travel. If you are not a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, green card, or visa holder, and you refuse to answer questions, that can prevent entry into the country. An example of the appropriate questions to be asked, like I stated before, are where did you go? Who did you stay? What's the purpose of your visit? It gets to the questionable grounds, or totally inappropriate grounds, I'll say, is when you start getting asked questions about your religion, or where were you, certain ideologies that you might believe in. Are you Sunni or Shia? What masjid do you go to? While those are, in my opinion, as a Muslim, legally those questions are inappropriate. That we had a discussion about this before. If somebody's going to ask me, what's your religion? I'm going to tell them I'm Muslim. For me, I know I'm a U.S. citizen. They have to allow me in. But you have to make sure to assert to the officer that you know your rights. So there's a 4-point narrative that we suggest you tell somebody if you think that your rights are being violated, if you're being asked an inappropriate question. CBP officers are under an obligation to treat everybody with courtesy and dignity. Not only that, they have to tell you who their supervisor is. So if you ask who the supervisor is, they got to let you know. So let's say you're traveling, you get asked, are you carrying $10,000 or over? No, I'm not. Well, which mosque do you go to? You tell them, if you're a U.S. citizen or not, doesn't matter. I've already identified myself. I feel like I'm being discriminated against. I want to speak to your supervisor, and I want to speak to my lawyer. Now, legally, you don't have a right to an attorney at the border, but you should still inform the officer that you want to speak with a lawyer. So if you are being delayed unreasonably, and you're being asked inappropriate questions about your religion or anything beyond basic details about your trip, which are you in any political group, or what businesses do you do, and why do you visit Pakistan so frequently? You say, I've already identified myself. I think I'm being discriminated against. I want to speak to your supervisor, and I want to speak with a lawyer. If you're a U.S. citizen, that might delay your travel, but they have to let you in. If you are not a U.S. citizen, that could prevent entry into the country. So, what we're telling you is what your rights are, and to know them. But, it's really going to be up to you. If you're a non-U.S. citizen and someone asks you a question, you really got to get in, knowing that not answering might prevent you from entering to the United States. You're going to make that call. I will say, any specific questions on what you're wondering, call us. I mean, that's what we're here for. What I can tell you is that the laws, and we're going to talk about travel ban, inshallah, in a little bit after I touch about one more point regarding searches. But what we know is that the laws are constantly changing, and nothing's really certain. I mean, we can tell you something about how things are supposed to go, but we've had situations, hence why we file lawsuits, is that things don't go as they're supposed to legally, like people who are U.S. citizens not being allowed to board a plane either. I'm going to talk about searches really quick, and then I'm going to touch base on the travel ban because I want to open it up to questions and some discussion, inshallah. So when you're traveling, your belongings, they have to be searched at the border. You can't refuse a search of your belongings, or it's a heavily contested issue right now. The laws are constantly changing as it relates to searching your electronic device, your cell phone. So let's just get past the fact that you have to let up your bags for searches. There's no such thing as refusing that. Now, if they're treating your belongings very disrespectfully, or they're airing everything out and throwing it all over the place, definitely. Make sure you know who's dealing with you, so you can note that, and we can make a trip complaint for you. It's not just about whether or not your travel's being delayed, but also the treatment by the CBP officer. If they're treating you rudely, we can still file a complaint on your behalf. What's heavily contested, and not just from the Muslims, it's also from civil rights groups, is whether or not a search of a cell phone is an unreasonable search, which would be a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That's still being argued, but as of now, you do have to give your cell phone, but you don't have to give your cell phone password. I'll tell you that if you don't do that, it might result in the confiscation of your cell phone. So then you ask the question, well, should I even travel with my cell phone? Or kind of what's the value here? I mean, you're traveling with a lot of information, and if it's not like we're hiding something criminal, but for somebody like an attorney, for example, I have clients, there's confidential information, I don't want to give that up. There's physicians who might be violating HIPAA, by giving their phone. Accountants, yes. Okay? Private family things that we have an expectation of privacy in these matters. So what I would suggest is, if you can, try to travel with a phone that doesn't carry all your data on it. I know it's an inconvenience, but it prevents a larger one in the long run. Put your info on a separate hard drive and travel that way. Because like I said, you do have to submit your cell phone. You don't have to give your cell phone password. But if you don't, that could lead to confiscation.
Okay. So the questions are, we're talking about electronics and the time when your electronics are being checked. There's one thing that is what Omar said, that is the physical check of your electronics. There's nothing that you carry that is not subject to physical search. So you need to surrender, like we do when we go to a port of entry, basically all of our belongings for the authorities to check them physically. What we're talking now is access to our belongings. First of all, even before the issue of access or not, it is within the authority. Listen to this. It is within the authority of the law enforcement in the border to retain any of your electronics for their inspection, even if it takes days. This literally means that any of your electronics may be withheld in a port of entry. Your laptop, your tablet, your iWatch probably, your phone. Sir, I'm going to hold that. Here's a receipt. We'll give it back to you. Like that. They do have the authority saying, I need to further check that. I'm going to retain it. They may retain it. That is not confiscating your equipment. They may retain it. So any electronics you are carrying are subject for the law enforcement to retain them for further inspection and get them back to you on a later date. Now we're talking about another topic. The access to the data on your electronics, meaning your thumbprint or meaning your code to enter into your data. That is what Omar just explained, that it is the law today is that it is within your right not to give that access code to the law enforcement agent, even if he asks for it. Could I have your passcode? You have a right to say, no. Then I'm going to retain it. I'm going to let you know that in the border, law enforcement have retained equipment with, after giving the password and after not giving the password. Do you get this? Equipment has been retained in the borders after giving the password, and equipment have been retained in the border after not giving the password. So if I give the password, will that guarantee that I'm going to expedite this and I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to get my equipment back? The straight answer is no. You don't have that guarantee that it's going to be more expedited, or you don't have the guarantee that you're going to get it back. Either way. So it is going to be basically your call. We're telling you about your rights, that you have a right not to give the password and allow any law enforcement to look in your phone about your prescriptions, the prescriptions of your wife. That data that is protected under federal law to be private data, you don't need to voluntarily disclose it. Because there's another way that the government have to get it if they really have an interest on getting it. And it's asking a judge, Judge, would you give me permission to break in the code of Wilfredo's phone and see the data on Wilfredo's phone? When you tell them, I'm not giving you my code, they still have that option, and they could exercise it. But they're not getting the data because you voluntarily gave them the access to the pictures of your family, your prescriptions, your emails, your text messages, everything. Your addresses, your previous addresses, your payments, your medical payments, those things that are protected under federal law to be secret. Like, for example, that HIPAA Act, that your medical things are secretly yours. You're disclosing them the minute you say open, and they can access your Walgreens, your whatever. You see what I mean? Thank you. Go ahead, Omar. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. The best thing to do then is, if you have private information, try not to travel with it. I should mention that, if your phone is confiscated, it could be held up for anywhere from a week to, in the worst case, we've seen for 4 months. So it's just, not worth it, in my opinion. If you can travel with a separate phone or just delete your data, if you're okay, some people are okay with confiscation. We have many different types, and we're dealing with a client now. We're going to file a lawsuit because they've had his phone for months now. U.S. citizen, was allowed entry, but was delayed heavily. And so just know that travel lightly. I think that's the best way to do it. I'm going to talk about the travel ban very briefly, and let's open up to questions, inshallah. So as you know, a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that the president is within his executive power to issue an order banning the travel or issuance of visas specifically to people from certain countries, and that's Syria, Somalia, Iran, Libya, Yemen, and then Venezuela and North Korea, which everybody would say is kind of like window dressing. It's kind of like a shroud to try to say that it's not a Muslim ban, but essentially all these countries are primarily Muslim countries, like especially Iran and Syria, Somalia and Libya and Yemen. This is not a flat-out ban on all Muslims. I mean, this is dealing with specific countries, but our fear and our hope that it doesn't happen is that the president would then see that he has the power to then expand this list. But what it prevents is the issuance of certain visas depending on the country. For visa holders, that it only applies to visa holders up until December 4th, 2017. All other visa issuances after that are suspended, but some people have witnessed that visa holders before December 2017, those visas were actually suspended as well. In Syria and Iran, almost all immigrant visas are suspended for all of the countries. And in Syria and Iran, all immigrant and non-immigrant visas are suspended, with the exception of in Iran, student visas are allowed. And in Somalia, immigrant visas are allowed, but non-immigrant visas are allowed, but immigrant visas are suspended. Venezuela, it's only non-immigrant visas related to certain public officials. And so it's definitely, we recommend, if you have a question about it, I mean, it gets kind of complex, call us. You have a loved one who's traveling, they're of Syrian descent, they have a visa. The problem is that the laws are uncertain. I mean, we've heard stories where as long as you had your visa issued before December 4th, 2017, you should be okay. That's coming from DHS, but then others have experienced otherwise. So really, just the most important thing I want to hammer home, this is a Know Your Rights, we're letting you know what your rights are for traveling, but for specific info, please call us. I'm going to open up the floor for questioning, and then inshallah, unless Wilfredo, maybe we can get into a deeper discussion, inshallah.
Let me get the mic. Bismillah.
Does the U.S. government have a right to withdraw the citizenship that they had given to you?
Does the U.S. government have the right to withdraw your citizenship? No. They can revoke certain immigration statuses and deport you, but if you're a U.S. citizen, you can only renounce that by yourself. At the border, and brothers, you brought up a good point, because at the border, if you are a non-U.S. citizen, sometimes they might get you to sign documentation. Don't sign anything if you're ever at the border. Just don't sign anything, because some of those documents might be you're giving up your travel rights, your immigration status. So we always suggest that don't sign any documents. To answer your question, brother, no, you can't get your citizenship revoked.
There's one extreme case of treason or very exceptional that has not been used regularly, and that is what that recent rumor came in. Also, there was another rumor about the government, the border agencies, immigration agencies, reviewing all the naturalization cases to see if there were anything wrong in the application process. And they have not announced that there are officially a review of that yet. So it's still like the rumors of things that technically the government probably is within their powers to examine the application of anybody for citizenship or anything in the government, and but it's not like an official policy yet. But there are some concerns on that. Yes, I know where your question is coming from.
So I'm going to offer a question, because actually we've been getting it, and then I just want to let you know kind of the importance of knowing what your rights are, at least being able to assert them, because even though there might be policies in place, that doesn't mean that actually happens at the border. And a question I get is, if I'm traveling with my minor child, can they separate us? And we say no. They don't have the right to separate. But we see it happen, and then as you see right now in current events, there's 1-year-olds being separated from their parents. So to answer, it's not just about knowing your rights and what the problems are, but how do you handle it? What do you do? And the best thing that we suggest at the border is to let somebody know that you don't want to approve of this. Know that you have the right to speak to a supervisor. Tell them that it's inappropriate, and report it right away. That's if you have like a 17-year-old and they take you aside for questioning, and they take your minor child aside for questioning as well. It's very important to let your kids know to do the same thing when you're traveling. And it's not just you who's going to assert your rights. Your children are going to do the same thing. Any questions? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. If you're a U.S. citizen coming back from and you're at the airport and they pull you in for a secondary review, this is a two-part question. What's the logical timeline in the second review? How many hours before you should start getting concerned? And secondly, does the CBP officer give you updates? Let's say, this is the reason why we're holding you back. Or are they obligated to tell you this? And when should you get concerned that this thing is taking too long before I escalate it to somebody else?
Very good questions, brother. You know, the general time it should take for you to get through is about 30, 45 minutes. But that's not when your family should be getting worried. My rule of thumb here, and I'll tell you by experience, is it's good to wait, 2 hours if you haven't heard from your loved one for 2 hours before trying to check up. It happened during Ramadan. We got calls, a lot of imams come in, and, I had a brother call me, said, our imam, he landed at 9:30, but, it's 10:30, we haven't seen it yet. I said, brother, just give it, one more hour. If not, alhamdulillah, he got released. So 2 hours is usually good before contacting. And then you said, does the CBP have to give you an update of what they're doing? No. I mean, they're going to tell you that they're just getting information. It's just part of the process. Some of the officers, they'll even say like, I'm just doing my job. I know, I'm sorry, because they're really following orders themselves. And they should be courteous, and some of them even understand that this is an inconvenience. They shouldn't be doing it. Others are not so courteous. Again, make eye contact and tell the officer, I've already identified myself. I feel like I'm being discriminated against. I want to speak to your supervisor, and I'm going to call my lawyer with confidence. I mean, you'd be surprised about how much that'll do if you just look them in the eye and say that versus looking in the ground. And I know it's tough at the border, but again, these are people just like us, and they're just doing their job. So if you let them know.
And proactively ask for the supervisor's name and their presence. At some point, when you know that they're crossing the line of a wait, and you're not being informed, you say, I want to speak with the supervisor. I've been held too long. I've provided all the information I need to provide here at the border. So I want to speak with the supervisor and ask them to identify themselves. Because what you want to do is, after you go through that ordeal, is to be able to narrate it to us so we can file a complaint against those officers. So we need Mr. Smith and a Mr. Reese who took care of this situation, at least that. And we were able to locate it by the time and date and place and the last name. And we will be able to file a complaint. Another thing, if you went through the ordeal, then you're back home. Unfortunately, most of us elect to do nothing. Then when we complain in the Department of Homeland Security of the many Muslims they're detaining, they asked us, the statistics doesn't reflect that we're detaining a lot of Muslims that are going any kind of ordeal. You see, so you need to document yourself. Because when this happened to you on a second time, then you will have evidence that this is the second time this happens to you. And when it happens a third time, you can have evidence on this day and file a complaint. On this day when I travel, I filed another complaint. So they're singling me out every time I travel because I'm Muslim. You see how it helps? But you need to document what's happening with you. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody else can document what you go through. So if you went through something while traveling, get the names and get back to care at some point as soon as possible before you start forgetting what happened, and file a complaint.
That's correct. Yeah, never hesitate to call. I mean, some people, they say, no, it's only 45 minutes, but the guy was really rude, but I still got let in. It's also about documentation so that we could provide people the numbers. Any questions, inshallah? I just want to say, it's really a pleasure and honor to be here. Inshallah, I want to really come here more often and talk about more subjects involving issues that we deal with. Like, unfortunately, we get stories that come across my desk where kids, elementary school, middle school, they're being called Taliban and ISIS, and the problem is that the administration is not doing anything about it. It's very important that our kids know that if they're being bullied or harassed in school, to let their parents know, let a teacher know, and definitely if you don't feel that the situation is being resolved, just absolutely call our office, inshallah. But next time around, I definitely, it'd be great to have a KYR for the kids, and that's what we're planning, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, this is one of the, we're planning to do over 100 Know Your Rights trainings in this tour 2018-2019. Alhamdulillah, our family of Darul Uloom is like the our third stop. We have stops everywhere throughout the state. But like Omar said, we do have other trainings, and inshallah, we'll at some point come back, probably from another training that is not the Know Your Rights When Travel, but another one that will benefit you and your family, inshallah. So remember, memorize the number of your family or somebody, because when you're in the border, you're going to say, may I speak with my wife or my lawyer or care? I say, here's the phone. I say, no, I want my phone. No, you cannot have your phone. Here's a phone for you to call. And unfortunately, in these days, we don't memorize almost phones. So make sure you memorize a couple of phones, so when you're in that predicament, you know who to call. Okay, inshallah, one of those may be care, obviously, and a family member. And have family members expecting you at certain point, at certain time, so they can deduct, this is too much, let me call somebody. Okay? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to have a table, inshallah. You may file a survey, and you can make any donations to CARE, or you can get information on knowing your rights when traveling and other matters in our table, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Sheikh Safaya.
Okay, alhamdulillah. We want to say, mashallah, jazakallah to brother Wilfredo and attorney brother Umar for coming here tonight and to share with everyone the Know Your Rights program that they have nationwide. It is really indeed a pleasure, and you know, CARE, as we normally hear and we know, is the largest civil rights Muslim organization in the United States of America, and they really do a phenomenal and unique job. So they got your rights, you got your rights, and they got the experience. And that's one of the barakat and blessings of being in the United States of America. America does give you your rights, but you need to know your rights first. And really and truly, many times I get stopped, and the first thing I will ask, yes, you know, Brother Wilfredo, when you were saying that, when I ask an officer, could I speak to your supervisor, they immediately turn back, look at me, take a deep breath, and say, okay, this guy, I think he knows what is going on. Because that's a very interesting thing, to ask for the supervisor. And we thank Brother Wilfredo and Brother Umar for being here, and thank all of you for coming here. So you can always ask them for more information as you need and whenever you need, inshallah. But normally on a Thursday night, we still have a 15 minutes for Isha Salah. Normally on a Thursday night, we have Surah Kaf, Surah Dukhan, Surah Mulk, Surah Waqiyah, all these many surahs being recited. Brother Matlub and a few brothers do it here. We got the dhikr and everything in the back. But so that we can get the full barakat of the night, I will just ask the Hufaz to just come in front and just rattle those 3 surahs first. And not Surah Kaf, because that will take us until tomorrow, inshallah. But at least just Surah Waqiyah and Mulk, inshallah, and Dukhan.